Much, and thanks for inviting me. I'm very glad that Noah brought up this issue of weapons and Israel's use of Gaza and the entire Palestinian area as a laboratory for developing and exporting weapons, which explains to a large degree why it has the clout it does in the international community, because it's a part of what I call its security politics. It's made itself very useful as both an enforcer of global North economic and military political policies in the global South, and particularly in the Arab world, but also in terms of its ability to give technologies repression to repressive governments all over the world, and in that way garner a lot of support for its own policies. I wrote a book about this that's called War Against the People, Israel, the Palestinians, and Global Pacification. But I think and today, another deal that was signed, Israel signed a $600 million deal for air defense systems with the country of Slovakia. So, you can't underestimate, and it's good that Noah brought that up, this dimension as well. From my point of view, it brings up a key issue here, and that is that the Palestinians are absolutely irrelevant to Israel and to its entire Zionist enterprise. They're not considered a factor. Their existence as a national group, their rights, their well-being certainly are simply not factors. They're simply a kind of an object to be dealt with, and if possible, like in developing the weapons, an object that you can experiment on in order to develop better weapons of suppression and in that way use them as a kind of a marketing tool. Also as a foil, terrorists and so on, as a foil to justify your policies. And I think that's something we have to keep in mind, because for Israel and much of the international community, the Palestinians are not really real. They're not really a people, a part of humanity that has rights. I think one of the representatives of the Palestinians in the UN in the Security Council said a few weeks ago, aren't we even human? I mean, this is part of the equation. In other words, it's not like, you can draw on sympathy for Palestinians, I think, more and more in the international community, but I don't think this is really a consideration among governments. And therefore, we have to understand that genocide is built into settler colonialism, which is what Zionism is. What propels Israel is the settler colonial aspiration of taking over Palestine, displacing its people, taking its lands, and transforming an Arab country into a Jewish country. This is the context that we always have to put, I think, everything inside of. No specific events, including the genocide in Gaza, stands by itself or simply happens in the course of events. It all follows a pattern of displacement and the takeover of Palestine, basically, so that genocide is then built into the Zionist settler colonial project. It was built into other settler colonial projects too. If you look at Australia, New Zealand, the United States, Canada, and other places as well, both cultural and physical genocide. So that I think we have to understand in terms of this wider context. It's not a problem specific to Gaza, arising on October 7th that we have to deal with and end. It, as Noah says, it extends into the West Bank. It extends and extended into Israel itself with the Nakba in 1948. And it's a part and parcel of the Zionist movement, which means then that the only way out of this is to decolonize Zionism, decolonize the Israeli colonial enterprise regime, and in that way get to some better place that we don't have maybe time to talk about tonight. The problem we have, of course, is that we really don't have leverage. Human rights does not mean very much today in the international community. Now, as we're getting into Trump's, Trump is the epitome of transactionalism in international relations. There's no alliances, there's no values, there's no human rights, there's no rules-based international order. Everything is a deal. And in fact, he calls the Abraham Accords and the legitimizing of Israel's settler enterprise and the annexation of East Jerusalem to Israel the deal of the century. Everything is a deal. And therefore, our mechanisms of human rights, international law, the UN even, all the ICC, all these mechanisms really have no leverage. And I think we have to begin to think about other ways in which we have to respond to this. And of course, then we have to look at the timing of what happened in Gaza. Not only is genocide built into the Zionist enterprise, but we have to look at why now. Why all of a sudden this escalation, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. And I think what we have to keep in mind at this moment is the normalization process that Trump began with the Abraham Accords and the end of his first administration. It's been continued by Biden. Only October 7th, the Hamas attack deflected and delayed the signing by Saudi Arabia onto a normalization agreement with Israel. And now Trump, of course, this is his prime priority right now, is to go back to the Abraham Accords, the jewel in the crown, the only missing piece, of course, being Saudi Arabia. That's indicated it's very willing to normalize with Israel. And normalization, I think, represents the greatest threat to the Palestinians since 1948, since the Nakba. Because normalization is not simply another stage in the process. That's how settler colonialism ends. It normalizes. And normalization is a closure. There is very little political space after normalization. Normalization means the Israeli apartheid regime has been recognized and legitimized. It means the settler enterprise has been accepted. It means that Palestinians are permanently locked into an apartheid state, an apartheid reality where they live on a Bantustan and stand on maybe 10 to 15% of historic Palestine. And it means with the normalization going through the Arab world, that this apartheid regime gets international legitimacy and it becomes permanent. And once it's normalized, it's normalized. There is no next stage. That is the end in a sense. And I think that's how Israel looks at it. So this is a tremendous challenge facing us in the next few months. I mean, Trump comes in January. This is all in place. Saudi Arabia has said it will normalize with Israel on condition. And you know what the condition is? That there's a pathway to a Palestinian state. That Israel promises that someday in the future, maybe it will consider the possibility of establishing a Palestinian state. That's the condition. So Saudi Arabia is going to go into this. I think it's going to complete this normalization process in a way. And one thing that's very interesting is that, it's very hard to mobilize people around normalization. It's such a dry, gray, academic kind of a term. And therefore, I think all our protest movements and our political movements are missing this because they're not connected to what's going on the ground politically. We all continue with our agendas, regardless of what's happening on the ground. And just to finish, I want to say, that this has to be the focus of our, and I think in terms of ending not only the genocide in Gaza, but the entire genocide, we have to oppose immediately the normalization process and then begin to work towards what does decolonization mean and what is a future political program, which Chaim and I at least think is one democratic state. What's missing here, and I'll end on this, is that there is no pressure that I know of. We're talking here about an Arab organization that's hosting this. I don't know, first of all, pressures in general on governments not to enter into the normalization process. But since we're talking about Arab governments, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Jordan, Egypt, Bahrain, Morocco, that just signed a whole drone deal with Israel this week as well. Egypt, where is the Arab Muslim voice in particular to come out in public and tell these Arab governments, no, you do not sign normalization. And, we can blame Israel. We can blame the United States. We can look at Trump and so on. But this will not happen unless the Arab governments are the ones that cooperate with it. And so there has to be a specific, I think, worldwide pressure put by Arab and Muslim communities the world over on these Arab governments not to normalize with Israel. That seems to me the major source of leverage that exists in order to prevent this.
Jeff, I just have one quick question for you. Actually, what I can understand from the escalation now in the West Bank and in Gaza as well, I mean the Strip as well, is that I can understand it in the context that can we understand it in the context that Trump's just turns a blind eye till he takes office, and then he can apply his plans, like saying come on, do whatever you want to do, and then I will stop this when I come in office. Is that an probability?
Well, I think Trump plays a huge role here. Trump has given a deadline to Netanyahu. Netanyahu would keep this going forever if he could, for his own personal and political reasons. Trump, who's an isolationist, who does not want to inherit Gaza and so on, has said to Netanyahu, I want this ended before I'm inaugurated on January 20th. So Netanyahu has a deadline. So I think, yes, Trump does play a role in ending the genocide, getting to a ceasefire. I mean, who knows what will happen after that? I mean, then the Palestinians are left on their own. Nevertheless, I think it will happen. And they're talking now about a deal, about the hostages and everything, because of Trump's pressure.
I
Afterwards,
see.
I think afterwards it becomes irrelevant. I think that's where the West Bank becomes more important politically than Gaza.